What's going on, everyone? Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to talk to you about my Hoya care because some of you asked me what it is that I do for my Hoyas and how I care for them, so I thought I'd make a quick video about what I do. Just a quick disclaimer, please remember that this is what works out for me. This is based on my environment and my lighting situation, my setup. So this is my very personal experience of how I care for my Hoyas and what has been working out for me throughout this entire year that I've been growing Hoyas. So I think for starters, it's important that I mention that I do live in Florida. Basically, they do live in a controlled environment, whether they're in a cabinet or outside of the cabinet, because I keep the temperature in my house between 76 during the day and 69 at night, and my humidity always stays above 52 or 53 and maybe caps at like 55. So it's always within that 50% range. They are essentially in a controlled environment no matter where they are in the house. For the Hoyas that are a little more established and that I think are a little less fuzzy, they have less requirements, I keep those in the living room. The Hoyas that have a little bit of a higher requirement for humidity and light, those I do keep in the cabinet. If they're fuzzy, they have higher humidity and temperature requirements. If I want them to grow faster, and if I'm rooting them, they're definitely going to live in my cabinet. Otherwise, I think they do perfectly fine in my ambient conditions, just because, again, I live in Florida and it's a favorable environment for them. My Clemenceorums, I have 3 of them. So those live in my cabinet. I'm not sure completely if my Clemenceorum could live outside of the cabinet, but I know for a fact that undulata does not like lower humidity and warmer temperatures. And in my cabinet, I do have a seedling mat that is running 24/7, just because I'm constantly either rooting Hoyas or growing anthuriums from seed. Like currently I do have a couple of seeds that are growing, so I have to have my seedling mat running consistently in the cabinet so it stays pretty warm. So this is my undulata and it lives in my cabinet because I recently imported this. I took a couple of cuttings from the plant. Instead of rooting the whole thing, I took cuttings, so it's going to live in my cabinet probably forever. I already had a Hoya undulata before. I did an unboxing in my shorts, and that one is long gone, rest in peace, because I tried to grow it in ambient humidity, and not only did it not like the cooler temperatures that I get at night, but I overwatered because it was not in a self-watering pot. So that one is long gone. So I have this one, it's rooted and it lives in moss. I saw a couple of people on the Facebook group talking about how they grow their undulata in moss. So not only did they root it in moss, but they kept it in moss, and theirs is growing beautifully. This was an import, and instead of rooting it in perlite, I wanted to make sure that it had its best chance at survival. So I put it directly in moss and it rooted. So for my media, you guys know I grow in pond almost strictly because I tend to overwater my plants. And for my plants in pond, I do have them in a self-watering pot. However, self-watering pot doesn't mean, at least for me, that I'm going to spend bank on Amazon or something paying for self-watering pots, because they can get pricey, and sometimes I just don't have them in hand, so I make them out of whatever I can find in my house. For example, my Clemenceorum is in a plastic cup and in a reusable plastic cup, and it just worked. My caudata is not in a typical self-watering pot. It's in a plastic nursery pot, and I found this pot at Michael's that just fits, leaving just a little bit of room at the bottom to have a little bit of water reservoir. And that is my self-watering pot. Some people grow in pond without a water reservoir, and they just let the plant kind of like sit in a little bit of water. I personally don't like that. I don't want the risk of having root rot, so I always make sure I have a water reservoir and just that space between my roots, my media, and the water. And this is another plant that I just have in a makeshift self-watering pot. I bought a pack of like little sauce cups, I think they are actually, not deli cups. And then these are plastic cups that I don't use in my house anymore because I've switched to glass. So instead of throwing them out, I put my plant in there, and it just fits perfectly, but it gives me that space between my water reservoir and my root system. For pots that are actually self-watering pots, I have a ton of these. These are from Amazon, but in my very, very honest opinion, I am going to try to switch away from these pots, and the only reason why is because you see that little clear screen right here. When the light hits the water and the wick cord, they start turning green, and it's because the water's hitting, I think it's the nutrients, but I know it has to do with the water, with the light hitting that water with nutrients, and I absolutely hate that. I think it looks disgusting. I'm not sure if it's bad for the plant. So while editing, I looked this up, and it seems to be a little bad for your plant, and the reason is because algae is also living and it needs oxygen to continue to live. So with the algae in the same water as your plants, the two are consistently competing for oxygen to grow, so it makes sense why it could be a little detrimental for your plants. But the water just gets so murky and gross within a very short period of time. So I'm going to be switching most of my self-watering pots to pots that don't have that little screen. This is similar to a Hoya. This is a Discidia one stripe. And I just want to show you how it gets because of the light hitting the water reservoir. So this is how it always gets before I clean it. So between every single watering, I have to clean that. I personally don't like how it looks because you can see from the outside that it's like green and just gross. So for the most part, I always have to be on top of that, which is it's a task that I prefer not to have. You should still probably wash your water reservoir container over time just to avoid some buildup, but not as often as I'm having it to do. That is how I combat my overwatering issue, my toxic trait with plants, which is overwatering. It's by having my water reservoir not touching the plant media or the roots. The only one that I have with the roots are touching the water is my public calyx. And some of them, I will leave them. If they start growing roots that are touching the water reservoir, I assess the situation. If the roots don't look brown, I am not going to bother, but eventually I will repot that plant. Just because the roots are touching the water reservoir doesn't necessarily mean that the plant is root bound. It's just the roots are going to seek moisture and they're going to seek water. So the first thing that they're going to do is try to reach for that water reservoir. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the plant needs to be repotted. So if the plant is not showing signs of stress, the roots are not brown, I'm not going to run and repot the plant just because the roots are starting to reach the water reservoir. So for watering my Hoyas, I have gotten a little bit more technical with my watering. If I have rainwater, I will always use rainwater. I have a silver bucket outside that collects rainwater, but it's not realistic to always have rainwater with the size of my bucket and the amount of plants that I have. So when I don't have rainwater, I just use tap water. My plants are thriving, as you guys can see. I think they're doing pretty good. So no harm in using tap water, but I do know that depending on where you live, the tap water could be a little more harsh. I consider the water where I am pretty harsh, but I'm not going to worry about it. What can I do? I'm not going to go out of my way and buy special water for my plants. It's just not realistic for me. If I have rainwater, they get rainwater. If not, tap water is what it is. Now for fertilizing, I do use a couple of different things. So for starters, I have started to include silica, and I know that some people use silica just for plants that are variegated, but I learned from other people that silica does help the plant endure hardship, whether it's drought. It makes the plant more hardy, and so I started using it specifically for my anthuriums because my anthuriums were showing a little bit of sign of stress, and I just don't have it in me to make a different type of fertilizer solution for my anthuriums, for my Hoyas. Again, that's another thing that is just not realistic for me. So if I make water with fertilizer, whatever I make for my anthuriums, my Hoyas are gonna get it, my phyllos are gonna get it, and again, nobody's showing signs of stress. Everybody's growing beautifully. So I'm not going to go out of my way to make a different water solution for different plants. Another thing that I've started adding to my plants, it's Calmag. I use Calmag based on the instructions of the label. This is the only brand I've used, and I recently started using it. I think it's been a month maybe since I started using it. So my opinion might be a little bit premeditated to say, but so far, again, I have had no issues with my plants. Everybody's growing vigorously and I have no complaints. For fertilizer, I have been using Jack's Classic forever. It is almost the only fertilizer I've ever used. I did use liquid dirt for a little bit, and I just simply didn't like it. I saw a little bit of browning, and I feel like my plants slowed down with the liquid dirt. I don't know, I just didn't like it, and I'm the type of person that if it's not broke, don't fix it. So because I had been using Jack's Classic since 2019, 2020, when I first started collecting plants back in Rhode Island, I went back to Jack's Classic. I didn't even finish the liquid dirt. I just didn't think it was working out for me completely. And I was using their 2015, which is for houseplants, but I saw somebody recommend the 2020 for Hoyas, and it's also pretty good for anthuriums. So this is the one I've been using now. Again, no complaints so far. It's been maybe 2 months using the 2020, and my plants are not showing me any signs of concern. Now again, this is an extra step because I am catering to my anthuriums as well. I do test my pH. So far I haven't had to adjust it, but if it was anything below a 5.6 or above a 6.5, I will be adjusting my pH. I think I have to get a better pH reader. I don't know if I did the buffer right, or maybe I have to recalibrate my pH reader, but so far it seems to be on the right range after I've added all of my bells and whistles. And lastly, for fertilizer, I cannot remember where I saw this. I think it was somebody on Instagram, but it was a long time ago, so I can't tell you where I learned this from exactly. But I did learn it from somebody that they use orchid mist on their Hoyas. And I use this religiously. Every time I come close to my Hoyas and I'm checking them out, I see they're doing good, I'm like, let me give you a little extra something. And I spray them with the orchid mist. I don't know if this is what's doing it for them, but my Wilbur Graves Silver and my Publicalyx are both pushing a peduncle. So it could be any of the 10,000 things I'm doing. As for lighting, the Hoyas that I have in my table right here, they get natural light. I think that's an E50 facing window or south facing window. I'm not sure. I'm going to check and put it on the screen. But they get light from that window, and they also get artificial light from a single bulb that I bought on Amazon. I'll put the picture of it on the screen because I don't remember. It's been a while. So they get a little bit of both. And for the ones that are in my cabinet, those get light from a Monios T8. I got a Monios T8 because I felt like my T5 wasn't strong enough. A lot of people do grow Hoyas with T5 and it works out for them. It even gets them to sun stress. But personally, I wanted a little bit more than that. I wanted to grow a little faster. So I got a T8 and it's been working out great. It gives me the sun stress that I want. Just to give you an example, this is my Hoya Bella, and it has some beautiful sun stress, especially on this vine. That is the one that is closest to the light. But it has like that cute red veining. So I really wanted that. I wanted to get some sun stress out of my Hoyas because I know that some of them have some pretty colors when they sun stress. For Hoya cuttings, I'm always going to use perlite. This time I have a bin with a seedling mat and one of the Monios TA lights at the top. You should air out your prop bins, but the 100% humidity has made it so that these Hoyas root extremely fast. I took these cuttings early this week, I think it was on Monday, and they already have roots. I tug and nothing is coming out. That's just something to keep in mind. You can keep your Hoyas in 100% humidity, just don't forget to air them out at least once a day and give them a ton of light, some heat, and you're going to have roots right away. So just to give you an example of how I root my Hoyas, this is a cutting of my Hoya Lima Splash, and I don't know if you can see there, but there's a root at the very top right there. I would not root my Hoyas with moss if I'm going to grow in pond, because moss is very difficult to remove from the roots and you can't completely remove it. It kind of gets stuck to your roots. So if I'm going to grow in pond, I would not use moss. My thing is perlite. I root everything in perlite just because perlite is a lot similar to pond. It's a similar substrate. So once I have my plant rooted, I don't have to worry about removing all of the perlite. I kind of just shake off the excess and put it in pond with no issue. For the water level, so these don't have any holes at the bottom, and I try to keep my water level about here, just barely touching the tip of the cutting, but not submerged. And when the water already looks completely low, then I go ahead and add some more water. This method to me is foolproof. It has given me the most success. I am so confident in my rooting method that I took a leap of faith and I purchased this cutting of a Gentile Princess, which I think is well above my budget for cuttings, but I knew that I could root this and have success, and that's what I did. I rooted this one in my IKEA cabinet on top of the seedling mat, and now that it's fully rooted, I put it in pond, and I have this barbecuing in my cabinet right under the light, just to make sure she doesn't revert, because I know that our Gentile Princess has the chance of reverting back to a Nova Ghost. So I think I covered everything. Lots of light, self-water in pots. Personally, I would not grow my Hoyas if they're not wicking water without sitting in a water reservoir. That's just me. I don't think it's safe for my plants to be sitting in water. I feel most comfortable having a water reservoir, but that's just me. Ton of light, ton of fertilizer. I fertilize on every watering. I don't know if I already mentioned that. And some humidity. I can only speak for my environment. I don't know about other people's environment. I get away with growing some of my Hoyas in room temperature because of that. All right, thank you all so much for watching. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments. I think I covered everything. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I see you all in the next one. Bye.